thought that I had to like sit and do Om all the time and all that kind of stuff. So when it just came naturally, like I learned that if I quit thinking and just let them talk, I was like, oh, it does work that way. And the time that finally convinced me is I had a friend over and he's like, can you just check and see if his friend had committed suicide? And he said, and I knew who he was talking about, but I had never met him. I'd only heard stories about him. And I looked over into my living room and we were sitting in my dining room and I saw
Welcome. My name is Lee Chandler, and I'd like to welcome you to The Wise Old Soul. Now remember, the wise old soul is inside each and every one of us. And I'm blessed to be able to interview and speak to some of the wisest old souls there are. And this evening, I'm going to have the pleasure of speaking with Sandy Feltz, who is a working medium and has a great story for us this evening. Welcome, Sandy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you on the Wise Old Soul. Now, Sandy, you and I had an opportunity to just chat briefly, and this is something that started for you when you were really very young. But at the same time, yes, it got suppressed a little bit and it reappeared. And that's a story that we're continuing to hear on a regular basis right now, especially with my generation. Maybe you can talk to me a little bit about those early years and what transpired during that period of time and what's really happened to you since.
Sure. From the earliest things I can remember, I always had what many people would say I had a too grown up understanding. I told my mom, we were raised Catholic, and I told my mom one time that I think if you messed up and you didn't get it right in this life, that you would have to come back until you could do it again and again. And the poor woman almost had a heart attack because we don't believe in reincarnation. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is, but I think that's the way God has it set up. And from as long as I can remember, whenever I go to bed at night, I would always hear, I thought the neighbors had their TV turned up really loud. And we lived in a city and the houses were close. And one night I remember going into my mom and saying, Mama, the neighbors have their TV up so loud, I can't not hear their TV. And she said, I know, honey, I've heard it time and time again. I don't know why they have it that loud. And it wasn't until years later, like in my 40s, when I read somewhere and thought, oh, that's what I was hearing. I was hearing the voices from the other side. But so every night I would hear conversations. I didn't see anybody, but I do remember that I slept with my covers over my head so that in case anybody was there, I wouldn't see them. So, but I'd have these in-depth conversations or listen to them. Eventually I had a couple of nightmares, which I believe now are remembered past lives. But, and I got scared about, I would say around 9 years of age. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was saying I wasn't doing anymore, but it all went away. And I remember I thought the neighbors learned to turn their TV down because I didn't hear the voices anymore. So, but eventually I'd have little snippets throughout my teenage years. Now this is a silly story, sort of, but when my boyfriend was going to go away to college, I was very stressed that he wasn't going to stay with me and all this. And we were sitting in front of my parents' house one night talking about it. And in this tree in my neighbor's yard, my grandpa's face appeared to me and said, would you knock it off? Just relax. It's all going to be fine. And I said to my boyfriend, you're not going to believe this, but my grandpa is in that tree. And he's like, I thought your grandpa was dead. I said, yeah, it's just his face. And believe it or not, he kind of looked at me funny, but he went, okay, cool. What's he saying? And I said, he says it's going to be fine, that we're going to stay together through college and we'll get married someday. And he went, oh, cool. Great. And it'll be 40 years in July.
Wow, congratulations.
So thank you. My grandpa was correct.
Interesting. I can totally relate to what you're saying about things that happen and we get scared. And when we get scared, we run away. And I had something similar when I was about 5 years old, and I just had an uncontrolled crying fest that I could not be consoled. And
Oh, wow.
it was scary. And all these years until very recently, I thought it was because I was scared. And in reality, it appears more like the guy, the entity was actually leaving, and I didn't want them to leave, and I was so upset about it. Yet I went through decades thinking that I was awfully scared. And
Ah,
and with understanding that recently, it's allowed me to open up just that much more. So I really appreciate you sharing that story of of being scared. And I think there's a lot of people, Sandy, that have the same challenge, that things have happened, they get scared. We literally close right down and close right up, and things shut down because our guides, those entities that are there to help us, listen to what we have to say. And
right,
if we're saying, I'm scared and I don't want to hear you, they stop.
right.
So,
They're looking out for you. If you can't handle it, they're like, okay, we'll wait until next time that there's an opportunity. As I got older and we moved away, my mom and I would talk a lot about those kind of things happening. And she's like, well, you've always had good intuition. I could always tell you when my husband's job interviews were going to work out, and I could even tell you how long he'd stay at the company, which didn't always feel comfortable because you go, wow, only 3 years. Okay. But I just thought I'm just taking lucky guesses and getting lucky. And then as my mom got she got cancer and she was not doing well, and we were talking, my mom and I were talking, and I said, Mom, if at all possible, I would always rush home to watch Montel Williams and Sylvia Brown on her. My mom saw it in St. Louis at 9 o'clock, and I saw it at 3. So she'd always call me and say, "It was a good one today. Sylvia was on. You got to watch it." So I would make sure I got the kids home from school, and we would sit down and watch it. And so when it came to this time for my mom, I said, Mama, if you could do me a favor, we always watched Sylvia Brown. If there's any way you can come back, will you please try? And she said, yes, definitely, I'll try. And it didn't mean anything to me at the time, but later it really come into play. She said, but don't just expect me in the usual ways you would see me or think of me. I'm going to find any way I can to get back to you. And years later, she came to me in definitely a way I would have never thought she would have. And it wasn't until I thought, oh, this can't be my mom. She would never let us do this. And then I heard those voices echo in my head and went, okay, I hear you. Gotcha. Okay. And from there, we just went on. My daughter, when my mom died, she was kind of our matriarch, and not kind of, she really was. And I was lost without her. And so my daughter tried to help me find my way to her. And once we realized that we could get something, then we worked really hard to get everything we could.
sure. Wonderful. Before your mom passed, did you find that your mom opened up more to an alternative way of thinking? Did you awaken a lot compared to
Well,
the way she was as when you were a child?
when we were young, I think my mom was really afraid a lot. And
Hmm.
as we got older and she got older, and I think it was more when she got cancer and she knew this time she was not going to make it. I think she decided, what the heck, I might as well voice everything I'm thinking. And we would talk, well, and Sylvia Brown opened a lot of doors for us. She was kind of my mom was kind of this is how it is, just like Sylvia. Sylvia could be really rough on people at times. I go, wow. And my mom, I mean, it's just the truth. Let it be, Sandy. Okay. but that once we started talking about Sylvia Brown and we watched other psychics on TV, then we started having conversations, and it was funny because a lot of things, when she would say, oh yeah, I remember doing that, I just didn't know what it was. And you're like, so wait, Mom, you've been psychic? And she's like, I'm not, okay. So I think that is a yes, Mom. And but until she got the ceiling fans whirring at my sister-in-law's house, I don't think we realized exactly how powerful she could be.
Well, it's nice that you had the opportunity to have that meeting of the minds before she passed. And there was an agreement that she's going to show up. And how that is, you have to use your own intuition, that gut, that wise old soul inside you to allow yourself that opportunity to know that it is her.
Well, I questioned it for a while because I don't. When my sister-in-law first called, we had said, "Oh, it's Mom," and we saw signs, and she was going to do the race for a cure with us the next year. She's like, when I get better, and we're going to do the race for the cure. I've never done it before. We're going to do it, and she didn't make it to the race for the cure. And so when we decided we would do it, and I had some exchange students, so there were 5 of us going, and we all got the shirts, and I thought it was great. It was purple because that was her favorite color. It just so happened our shirts turned out to be purple, and I'm like, yay, that's showing Mom's there. Well, we got out where we parked our car, and this yellow butterfly kept like coming right at my face, and like I was like, what is wrong with that butterfly? And it followed us the entire path. And just when I go, finally, that thing went away. And all of a sudden my daughter goes, would you quit swatting at Grandma? And I'm like, oh my God. Sorry, Mom. Sorry. And that butterfly stayed with us and would flit and go and my grandson was one of the 5, and he was probably 5 at that time. And he kept going, hi, Gigi. Hi, Gigi. I was like, oh my gosh. So in essence, that butterfly stayed with us until we got back to the car and we drove off. And it was so sad because I was like, I only realized it was Mom in the last 15 minutes. I could have spent the whole miserably hot morning with her. And so that just started things. I mean, one of my favorite things, and real quick, I'll let you go back to answering questions, or asking questions. Later that spring, that was in September, and then in the spring, I was feeling kind of down. I was like, Mom, I haven't seen any signs from you. I'm feeling really, pathetic and missing you a lot. And if you could just give me a sign. Well, when I was a little girl, butterflies meant my mom to me. They'd have those little Christmas shops at your school, and I'd always buy her a butterfly pin. And to me, that was my mom. It had purple in it. So that was my mom. Well, I had my daughter, and she was probably 5. So many, many years later, I said to my mom, I've always thought of you as butterflies. And she goes, yes, I know. And she was not happy. And I said, what? And she said, I don't know why you would pick a butterfly from me. And I said, I guess because of the pretty color. She's like, it's a bug. Who wants to be a bug? And I was like, oh, and I literally had all 3 of my children, and my daughter was probably 5, and it hurt my feelings so much that she'd been annoyed that I was like, okay. And then I went, well, get over yourself. You're in your 30s, grow up, But so that spring and I kept saying, I wish I could have a sign. My husband was outside, and we had watered the plants on the porch, and all of a sudden he goes, Sandy, come here, come here, come here. And I'm like, what? And I go out, and there must have been 30 to 40 butterflies all sitting on my porch. They stayed for over an hour.
Nice.
And I went, okay, this is legit. This is real. Oh my God, thank you. And you could do a lot more of this if you wanted to, Mom. So that butterfly thing, we had some butterflies stay even longer. There were 3 that stayed for hours. And finally, when I kept going outside and checking on them. And then when they were all gone, I was like, oh, I'm always like, yay. Okay. All right. Oh, I need more.
Well, I think
But
that's just it's natural for us, Sandy, that you get a sign, you want another one,
yes,
and you want
yes,
another one, and you want to be reinforced. And
right,
I know I've mentioned it in the podcast before. My experience with my father was very, very strong, but he said to me at the end, he says, "This is it. You will not have this again. It won't happen again." And so there were parameters put on it, and so I've never expected him to show up again, and he hasn't. You can feel the presence of them, but there's been no
right.
major sign or anything like that. So I think all of us need to recognize that when they cross over, sometimes they'll be there, sometimes they won't.
Right. I just think that some people, like, from everything that I've learned from the conversations that I've had in my mediumship things, mediumship sessions, and my with my mom and dad, and all the people that I've been able to speak to, even there, like, this is our hard course. This world is like the crash course of colleges, and on the other side, we still learn lessons. We still have jobs and things to do. It's just not nearly as harsh, stressful, and time is not as much of a burden as it is here. And I've been told that if you want to liken it to, like, you can take an intensive college course. Well, that's when you choose to come to Earth, because that's the hardest courses you're going to take. Or you can opt to learn the same lesson. It's just going to take a little bit longer there. And a couple of times I've, like, caught my parents either playing cards with friends, or one time my dad said, we're going to go eat now. Go eat with your family. We're busy. And I said, wait, you eat there? And he's like, we don't have to, but we get to enjoy it. And I was like, oh no. And he goes, and no guilt. And he goes, and I can eat all the chocolate I want with nobody telling me no. It's like, now that sounds like heaven to me.
Wonderful stories. Your mom's passed, you're in your 30s, and obviously things are starting to happen for you. You're starting to have that intuition start to kick in, that psychic ability. You started to understand that the gifts that we are all blessed with were waking up in you.
Yes.
And so
It
how did that
started.
grow?
Well, so my sister-in-law called and said, your mom is here. Every time I yell at your brother or something, the ceiling fan in the family room goes off and nobody's in there. And I was like, oh, all right, sure. Well, my dad passed then, and we were staying with them one weekend, and I witnessed it and was like, it's on. And they're like, nope, it's not. And so I was like, okay, mama, if this is you, make it go faster. And I was like, whoa, okay. So I was all excited. So then my nieces said, well, Aunt Sandy, we talked to grandma on a Ouija board. And I was like, oh, grandma would never let us even say the word. There's no way. And we were sitting there and they're like, let us show you. And I was like, surely. The girls were pushing it and everything. And all of a sudden she used, we asked a question, I said, why did you have to die so young? And she said, BC. And I'm like, and everybody's like, oh, see, grandma's not, I don't think it's that easy for her. And I'm like, no, I know what BC is. My mom had a shorthand that she had used as secretarial school, and BC was always because. And I said, because, and she said, if it wasn't me, it would have been one of my babies, and I wouldn't do that to them.
Mhm.
And so I said, so you mean, she said, I later, we got that much. And finally, my daughter and I came home from that weekend and went, this is real. We've got to find a board. We've got to find a board. Well, we went to beat the Beat Angel where you were, and we got a board. And through many sessions, what she said is at one point, while she was in the middle of fighting her battle, she said she went to sleep one night, and she said they came to her and said, we can go two ways with this. And but if you stay, then we need to know, we can tell you the future if you stay, and we can tell you the future if you go. And she wouldn't tell us what it was, but she said, even when she was on the other side, she said, no, you don't need to know everything, but just know that I took the hit for the rest of my babies. And I said, I don't know what you mean. And she said, I had a full life. I needed to give my babies an opportunity to all have a full life also. And I I was like devastated. But then she said, I had a friend who always said, her mom used to say, well, if it's don't just remember, it's not so bad that it couldn't be worse. And I used to think that was the worst advice anybody could give somebody. But if you look at it, you're right. And after a while, when my friend would say that, I go, yeah, but couldn't it be better? And she'd go, yeah. So when my mom was laying in that bed and I asked her if you could come to us, I said, Mama, I can't imagine how anything could be worse. And she said, I could. It could be one of my babies. And that was when she was on this side. And then when she got to the other side and she said, it was my turn instead of one of my babies. And I went, that would be my mom, giving it all up for her babies. And so anytime that I go, well, mom did that. So we don't have to worry about that. And my husband says, at some point, your mom's, what she did might run out of, and I go, well, not yet. But the Ouija board the whole Ouija board thing was that she would have never let us come to the Ouija board. And she said, remember, I told you that to expect it in any way you could, and not just in the ordinary ways. And she said, and believe me, I wouldn't have done a Ouija board if I could have gotten to you any other way. Well, eventually we learned other ways, but you should see people's faces when I'm sure there are people that are going to listen to this and go, oh God, no, not a Ouija board. But we had good, and I think you get from what you expect, but we eventually got safer ways and better communication skills. So.
Sure. And I appreciate what you said, safer ways, and you grow and I think you can do things with a little more protection than
Right.
What some other methods are. So
Right.
you're in your 40s, you've grown, your confidence starts to build in your psychic abilities, and you start talking to individuals. Fair?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it started that when I wanted advice and we had been using that board, and my mom had said, this is too hard. I have too much to say. Somebody's just got to listen to me. So my daughter would do it, but my daughter had very difficulties handling that energy exchange. She had heart palpitations from it. And so just because I didn't want to give up my mom and talking to her, I said, well, I'll do it until she gets strong enough to handle it. And then I thought, well, I don't know if that'll work just because I want it to. And eventually, I started trying, and I started writing down what I heard and then try to get verification and stuff like that. And eventually, I walked into a shop one time and it was a shop where they redid photographs, and it was a friend of mine. Her husband was a photographer. She said, look at this picture. And I said, oh my gosh. And I told this whole story about the pictures. And I said, and the lady looked at me and goes, yes, he had two families. He was a train guy and he had a family in this one and 30 miles away. And so I started thinking, wow, if I could do that then maybe those things that I'm hearing when I talk to other people. So I just started quickly like saying, oh, does it make any sense to you if I would say that it sounds like your aunt would have said, go for it? And, and then they'd say, yes, why do you think that? And my friend would go, because she's psychic. And I'd go, oh, I just hear some things sometimes. And she's like, and the one lady, I remember the one lady saying, so that means you're psychic? And I'm like, sure. I know. But eventually I started, the friend whose store I was in, she's like, I have a friend who wants to talk to you. And I'm like, okay. So we'd sit down and we just have conversations. And then after a while, my friend said, I think you're literally doing this. I mean, everybody else, you're getting confirmation from everybody that you're right. And I'm like, yeah, but it's just what I hear in my head. And she's like, yeah. And I went, but don't you in my mind, to be a medium, I thought you had to wear, and I do wear crystals, but I thought you had to wear crystals and you had to have, all this, and I do have spiritual stuff around, but I thought that I had to sit and do Om all the time and all that kind of stuff. So when it just came naturally, I learned that if I quit thinking and just let them talk, I was like, oh, it does work that way. And the time that finally convinced me is I had a friend over And he's like, can you just check and see if his friend had committed suicide? And I knew who he was talking about, but I had never met him. I'd only heard stories about him. And I looked over into my living room, and we were sitting in my dining room, and I saw, this is an old reference, but Bobby Sherman, do you know who that is?
I most
Okay.
certainly
He
do.
was when I was young, we went to the drive-in, and we had a kiddie movie, and then the older movie was about Bobby Sherman was playing a reservation child who'd been in reform school, and he was making his way back home, and he had on denim shirt, like a light denim shirt and denim jeans, and he looked Native American. And so I see this guy sitting up against my coffee table, and I look and go, who are you? And he said his name, and I said, no, I don't think that's right. And I asked the guy I was talking to, I said, so your friend, I know I know his name and I know who his brother is, but he doesn't look anything like the kid I know. And he goes, what do you see? And I said, I see a Native American child. And he said his dad was Cherokee. They had different dads. And I
Mhm.
went, oh, I still get goosebumps now, because it was my moment where I went, oh, wow, I really am. Wow, I'm doing this. And then I was like, yay. and then, so that took me probably 2 years to get to that point to where I was confident enough to say, I talk to dead people. And I don't call them dead, though. I don't like call them dead. I call them crossed over, or, um, I just, dead seems really harsh. If they're still around and they're still giving input, it's kind of rude to say they don't exist. So,
Sure. They're vibrating at a different frequency than us, and
right,
hence they're still there, but not necessarily visible for us.
right.
And with almost everyone that I've spoken to, whether it's here on the podcast or elsewhere, the one thing that seems to be very consistent with individuals that come on the show and talk to me about their gifts is they get to a point that they say, I think I'm just talking to myself, but I stop thinking and I let it come out. And a good friend of mine, Karn Swain, down in Australia, we have a great conversation on a regular basis about trust. It's all about
Yes.
trust. And so
Yeah.
people step out of their own way and they just allow what comes to their mind, they trust it, and the accuracy is just uncanny. And it obviously that seems to have happened for you as well, Sandy.
It did. The whole thing is, I started by, when I thought, oh, I can do this, and I had started with meditating like an hour before I talked to anybody. And one day I ran out of time, and I was like, okay, angels, I guess you got this, because I didn't do anything to prepare. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean disrespect. And it was one of the best sessions I had up to that point. And the woman, the woman was like, wow, you just talked to me. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's probably one of my lessons to have learned. Yeah. And so the whole trust, and even now, I've been doing this for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and probably more, but 8 years that I was confident in it. And even now, every once in a while, I go, oh, I probably okay, well, you guys got this, it's not me. And I feel like that moment when I say that, that's when they finally go, shush, oh, good, finally she'll let us do what we're supposed to be doing. And so a lot of it is learning that I just need to get out of my way of myself and let the process happen. And I think that one of the things that I believe is that all of us have this capability. It's just, it's scary, or we're so used to not leaving this way that we stand in our own way. And we make, we're human, we make our own lives more difficult than it needs to be. And that's in every situation.
Sure. And I think, you know, there's a certain amount of gaslighting that takes place. And maybe that's a little bit strong, but when we're born, we're told you do this, you do this, you do this, you know, go to school, get good grades, go to university, get good grades, get a good job, get married, have kids, and
Right.
we kind of buy into that. And I know for me, my life changed dramatically the first time I did a fire walk and walked across burning coals. And
Oh,
lots of people burnt their feet, and mine didn't. And it was a huge metaphor that it stopped me in my tracks. And I said, wow, what else have I been told in this life? And I believe it. And the fact of the matter is, it's not true necessarily, at least not true for me. It could be true for someone else, but it wasn't true for me. And so since then, I've walked poles half a dozen times. I've never burnt my feet,
oh,
but it really shifted who I was. And I think that's important for us to continue to find out who we are. But that was my big breakout, to start trusting a little bit more intuition and allowing myself to grow as an individual. And I think that's what people are looking for all the time, is growth. There's more to life
right.
than what there is. Or I've had bad luck. Well, don't focus on the bad luck. Let's focus on the good. And people start to crack open. But my generation was we had to abide by rules. There were lots of rules. And, I think there's still lots of rules around there, but, we have star seeds showing up with a totally different attitude, and they're very open to certain things. And man, it can be a real different world that's approaching us right now. Let me go back to your story, Zoe. You've grown, you're trusting, you've been practicing medium for 8 years, you do some channeling, you work one-on-one. Have you worked in
Right.
group sessions as well?
What's kind of funny is I kind of started in group sessions and then worked my way, because when you're talking to people in general and you're just are like, you're all talking and there's a group and then you say, oh, your aunt said this, or I bet it sounds like your aunt would say this, is how I used to say it, like I was just intuitively like guessing at what they would say. And then after a while, one lady said, can we just sit down? And I said, yeah. And she said, I have an issue that my other two friends don't know about. And I said, your cancer diagnosis? And she's like, yes. And I said, I'm not a medical anything, but your grandmother is saying that she will walk with you on this path and that you'll be fine. And you just have to trust your doctors and be your own advocate. And 7 months later, she was done with her treatment. And she said, every time I would get scared, I just remembered that you told me my grandma was with me. And I'm sorry, I veered off, but the point of that is that then I realized that you could help people, not in the medical advice part, but in the reminding people that their babies, their people haven't left them, that they're still there. But so I had done group things because I was at that lady's store and she'd go, I'm gonna have some friends and we'll come in after hours. And so I think when my leap of faith happened, when I went one-on-one with people and went, oh, okay, I can actually say that this is what they're saying. I'm not pretending that I'm just guessing. And so, yeah, so I have done, like I said, I started out with groups of 3 to 7, and then, but lately a lot of people, like I have sessions with them that last for about an hour, hour and a half sometimes. That's when you can get to the nitty gritty, get down to specific questions they can ask and stuff. And so whatever it takes for somebody to get the comfort and healing that they need, that's what I try to do. I try, whether it's one-on-one, some people are not comfortable seeing you one-on-one, and some people just need the comfort of their friends holding their hands. So however somebody is most comfortable so that they can relax and hear what they need to hear, that's how I can pretty much do it. Yeah. However makes them feel best.
A gentleman that I had the privilege of doing seminars with, which would be a familiar name to you, is Dr. Wayne Dyer. And before Wayne passed, we did some seminar work where I was promoting he and other speakers. And one of those things that Wayne would say from time to time is, I don't know what I'm about to say, but it's exactly what you need to hear. And it was uncanny how many people after his seminar would come up, and I had the privilege of speaking with them, and they'd say, this was the best thing that I've ever listened to, because there's a nugget that he would have said that really clicked and resonated with him. And it's all different nuggets, though. And so we have to be open to the opportunity to hear what's being delivered and allow it to kind of soak into us, I think, Sandy, and not put too much to it. Just the nuts and bolts. Don't think it through. If it resonates with you, there's probably something there.
Right. One of the things that we had a kind of round table thing at this shop one day, and there was a woman from Kentucky, and there was a woman from local, and she was a healer, and we were doing all this conversation, just going around, and everybody was just, I don't know, a sentence would come up, and everybody'd contribute to the conversation. And one of the big things that she said, which was kind of inconsequential at the time, when we all talked about the meeting later, like years later, I was like, oh, remember when she said this one little nugget? And they're like, yeah. I said, that's what gets me through in the moments where I go, okay. Like when someone asks me, what's their name? I don't always get names. I might get initials, but I don't always get full names, or it's not always the right name. So, and she said, it doesn't matter if you get every 100% of every letter correctly, as long as they can relate to who it is, and you get the message and they understand it's from them. I like them to be able to recognize the person who's talking. And when that happens and you see that in their face, and then they go, yes, and you go, oh, okay, that's what they needed. I wanted to talk to my mom and dad every day, and I realized that the healing and comfort I was getting from talking to them, I thought other people needed. And that's when I had the guts to go out and do it, because my deal is if I could have that comfort from my mom, why shouldn't other people get it? And if they aren't able to make that leap themselves yet, then I would be there to help them. And so I do this basically so that the people hear the comfort and healing that they need to move forward. I know for a long time I was stuck when my mom left. I didn't move forward. And so when you see that a person either recognizes the tone or the personality who comes through, and you see that aha moment in their face, you go, okay, they found what they needed. And it doesn't always happen. Like I've never had a session where they didn't have even one thing, but I've had a couple of people that come back, and there was a woman who had come and she's like, okay, now I've got what I want. And then months later she go, wait, I think I need more, So she, but after about, I think the third time in like a year, she came and she's like, you know what? All I do this for is the comfort of knowing that they're still there. She said, I won't call you as often. I'm like, you can call, but just know that you can talk to them on your own. And she'll text me every once in a while, go, I think my grandpa's calling, so I'll be calling you soon. Okay. Yeah. So, and I always tell her, you can talk to your grandpa on your own. She's like, yeah, I like it better when there's a translator. Okay.
Sure. Well, I think one of the gifts mediums and psychics, channelers do is they're able to reinforce that for people and allow them to start to trust themselves as well.
Right. I think the more people can trust in I think we're on the edge. Everything I hear, I totally believe it. We're on the edge of so many people joining forces, believing in it. And I don't need to be a leader in it, but I'd like to do stuff to help my little corner of the world. The more people that can connect and get that comfort and bring that peace to the world, because I feel like I get peace when I've talked to my mom and dad, even if it's a little bit. So to me, the more people that can do it and more people acknowledge that it's a possibility, I mean, that's just sharing love. That's just sharing love.
Sure. Yeah, I think you're right. So today, what's your big takeaway for individuals that may come to see you, maybe to talk to loved ones, but you must also have people that are saying, I know there's more, Sandy. I know there's more to life than just going to work every day and coming home and having dinner and going to bed and on that hamster wheel. What is it that you're hearing, and what advice have you been giving these folks at this time?
I have a group that we get together, and I do Reiki also. I've taken my second level. And so we'll get together and we'll do a prayer group together. We, it's not prayer as in, the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, but we get together and we put all our positive energy and we send it to a problem, a situation, a place, a person. And I think even if you don't have the Reiki training or you don't, but you can always, my biggest thing is show people kindness. And, I think if you're kind, and I know you can't do it every day, the guy that cuts you off or whatever, but it's allowing, if you open your mind up to the idea that there's so much more in life than a paycheck and going to work and doing all that you're supposed to do. And one of my favorite things is in one of the sessions, I heard somebody say, you know what? One of the reasons we're put on this earth is to enjoy life and make life better for others. And I was like, oh, I get the life better for others, but and I do have joy, but I mean, I wasn't thinking that was one of the things we were put here for. And I was like, wow, that is a really great thing for me. Any session that I have, there are so many times that I have a session and I go away feeling guilty going, wow, I got a lot out of that session. I hope they did, because I hear the message and go, oh, okay, I hear that from me too. Yeah. Okay. And so my biggest thing is we're on the precipice of this great chance to everybody be more accepting and more allow that this can happen. And I think the more that we do, and it's funny because when I first started this, I didn't tell anybody. And then I said something to someone, Cynthia, who's at the shop, and I said, yeah, I don't tell anybody that I do this. She's like, why not? I'm like, I don't want them to think I'm a wackadoodle. And she goes, how do you know they're not a wackadoodle? And they're just afraid to bring it up to you. And I went, oh, so you think I'm the one that should put myself out there to bring it up so that other people know it's okay to talk about it? And she's like, you seem bold. And I went, oh, cool. So I do. Not all places, not everywhere, but I do. All somebody has to do is give me an oomph of an inkling that they start to believe, well, let's talk.
Good. So you give them the gift to be able to voice something that they may be keeping in as well.
Yes. I know I was afraid to talk about it at first, and my world has exponentially gotten better. I love that my daughter is a huge proponent on mantras and affirmations and stuff. So I used to say, oh man, this day, she goes, is beautiful, is perfect, is great. I'm like, yes.
Great.
So
great.
I have learned to refocus my attitude, which I didn't think was ever bad, but it's gotten better.
Good. So we have so many different ways that we go in our lives, right? We've gone through many professions, many of us, and we have different beliefs, and they change, and our careers change. You've also gotten very involved in charity, and that's a very important part of your life as well, right?
Yes. It's
Can you talk to me about your charity?
Sure. Due to the fact that both my parents had cancer, when my mom was dying, she said to me, I need 2 favors from you. She thought it was the night she was leaving. And I said, okay. She goes, number 1, you have to take care of your daddy for me. And I was like, okay. And she said, and number 2, I want you to volunteer my space, because she always said when she got better, she was going to go out and tell people, just because you were diagnosed with cancer, you don't have to give up. As long as you have fight and hope, you can still live. And I said, oh, nope, not me. Nope, not going to do that. And she's like, well, I think you will. And I was like, you are so wrong. And so after she passed and we got home from the funeral and stuff, I knew one of my kids' friends, she used to come over to our house, and her daddy had passed away a few years before. And I knew that her mom was always in civic community minded stuff, but she was really big into the cancer things because her husband had cancer organizations, because her husband had died of lung cancer. And so I knew where she was, and I made sure to stay away from those places because there was no way I was ready to volunteer. And we just so happened to be at an art show at the museum, and I saw her. So I was so busy trying to stay away from her. Like I'd keep watching the room and look where she was and then go the opposite direction, that I bumped into her behind me. And I went, oh, and she goes, hi, I've been trying to get to you all night long. It's been a busy night. And I'm like, all right, Mom, I hear you. And so I said, hey, she goes, I'm so sorry to hear about your mom. I said, yeah, thank you. I said, which, since you brought it up, I know you do a lot of work with cancer organizations. So if you need like a envelope stuffer or anything, my mom asked me to volunteer, and I've been ducking you, but apparently not anymore. And she started laughing and she said, actually, I just started this new charity. And I've thought, what? Who starts a charity? How do you start a charity? And this woman pretty much single-handedly started a charity. She realized that cancer patients have more than 1 month of struggle, and there were organizations she was working with that would help for 1 month, give you 1 month's rent or something like that. And she found that cancer patients tend to have at least a year where they struggle. And so pretty single-handedly, she went about, she had some community support from friends and family, but she pretty much went ahead, researched, and found out how to start a charity that would help with everyday expenses for cancer patients. You know, medical gets taken care of one way or the other, but our organization is, I okay to say?
Absolutely, please.
Organization, okay. So the organization is called Touch Inc., Touch Incorporated, and Touch is an acronym, and it stands for what we help with. We help with transportation expenses, other expenses, which seem to be groceries a lot. So grocery cards, utilities, childcare, and housing. And we're very small, we're very grassroots, and she wanted it that way. Sometimes I wish we had big corporate money behind us, but instead we all just raise money and have fundraisers. But we're so small, we can only do it in 2 counties. But just recently, we totaled it all up, and yes, we've been doing it, but it hadn't really affected me. And I found out that just recently, since 2009, we have been giving to 550 patients. We have given over $750,000 of aid. And that is, since it's households and like keeping the lights on and stuff, it's not just our patient who benefits, it's their whole family. And so I always say that 550 is just a representation of the larger group that it really helped. But so I started with it in 2010, and in 2014 I was driving a 29-foot U-Haul full of stuff to an event, and she was on the phone talking to someone, and she hung up, and I said, hey, at some point, I don't know, are you retiring, or what's going to happen? I mean, are you going to do this till you cross over? And she's like, well, I was thinking, what are you going to do in a couple of years? Are you able to quit your job? And I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, well, we'll talk later. Jump ahead 2 years later, and she says, hey, I'm going to go to Maine, where she retired to, and says, can I drop some stuff off to you? And I said, sure, because I had been helping a little bit here and there, get patients their grocery cards and stuff like that. And 17 boxes and a checkbook later, she says, you're it. And I was like, okay. And it was pretty close to that, but I had an inkling a couple weeks before. She'd said, so you ready to take over? I'm like, no. And so in my mind, I really am, like, I don't have big connections. I'm not. So we are very much grassroots is what I'm trying to say. And I don't mean to belittle the people in our group by any means. They're all great people, and some of them are, big wigs, but I'm really nobody. I just help a lot. And so but when we hit that mark of the $750,000, I went, man, we are doing pretty well. So I'm very proud of what we do. And I consider that's my mom from the other side shoving me out the door going, I told you were going to volunteer. Ha ha, I win. And
Well, that's interesting.
so,
It's when life gets you down and you're having a tough go, one of the quickest ways to feel better is go out and do something for somebody else.
definitely,
Right.
yeah.
And you and I are very kindred spirits because I started a charity as well with a very good friend of mine. And so we're co-founders of our charity called Bracelets for Buildings, in which case we build houses overseas in third world countries for people that are absolutely the poorest of the poor. You know, they don't have food, they don't have shelter, they have nothing. And we were fortunate enough just to finish our 85th house now in Cambodia.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh,
you
wow.
talk
That's
about,
awesome.
thank you, but it's the grassroots. It's I had an opportunity. I keep a bracelet on my wrist, so I'm sharing this story with you because we all have our days where we kind of woe is me. I'm having a tough day. And my absolute worst day probably is significantly better than their absolute best day. And so my pity party
Yep,
ends very quickly. But
exactly.
we're very grassroots as well. And my philosophy has always been it's not how much money is given, it's the intention in which it is given. Right.
Right.
And I've had
Yep.
people that couldn't afford to do anything, but I give them a bracelet for whatever reason. If they want it, there it is. And I had a young lady come back that was in one of the airline lounges. And she said, Mr. Chandler, I'd like to give you a donation. And she says, I'm sorry, I wish it were more, but it was $2, right? That
Huh.
$2 was huge to her and her family. She
Right.
was a single mom. And so I think it's really important that the word gets out that it's not how much, it's the intention, because that intention has huge energy. And I know
Right.
your charity will continue to grow and do wonderful things. I thank you for sharing your story. That's wonderful to know. And 550 patients that you've helped, huge, absolutely huge with, two, three, five, seven people that are connected to them. So you're helping thousands of people all the time. And now with your
Right.
abilities and your gifts that you have, my goodness, you're helping people get in touch with people that have crossed over. You're allowing people to get in touch with their own wise old soul.
Yes.
You're an incredibly wonderful woman. Thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thank you for allowing me to share. I am, somebody says, are you out of the closet? I'm kind of in the doorway of the closet. But the I always say that what I can do is kind of one of the worst kept secrets in my world, because somebody said, "Oh, who do you not tell?" I said, "Well, I don't like, I don't know." And they said, "Oh, is it not people in your charity?" I'm like, "No, a lot of them know." And they're like, "Well, people you work with?" "No, some of them know." Like they're like, "Who do you not tell?" I said, "It's not that I don't tell. I just, when I get the sign, it's like I don't accost people on the street and say, 'Hey, guess what?'" It's part of me thinks that would be really fun, but I feel like that's almost like you can't ambush somebody, and I wouldn't want somebody to do that if anyway. But but if somebody is telling me their story of, so especially working with cancer patients, if somebody says, "I remember when my mom did," and if I hear something, then I'll ease into it. And so it's a lot of the people that come to me are word of mouth from my friends or somebody who's had a session with me. So I don't advertise, but I find that the people that need me come find me. And so I think that's the same with the charity as well, in that, you know, I just want to do something in my corner of the world that can help. And I am fortunate enough that I can help with that charity, and I can help with a couple other things.
Fabulous. Well, you're doing a great job. The feeling and the sense that I get as I sit here chatting to you, Sandy, is be prepared. I think your mother just finished putting her foot in the middle of your back and is getting ready to give you a big push. So hang on. Um, for those of you that missed it, we'll try to put it in the notes down below, but you can definitely find out about Touch. Sounds like a very
Oh, thank
worthwhile
you.
charity. And Sandy, I know you're just in the process of setting up a website where people will be
Yeah.
able to find you. Is there a way that people can get in touch with you? Do they go through a shop? What do people do?
The best way to probably do it is I have an email that people can do it. It's really simple. sandyf2connect@gmail.com. Or if you're in town through the Beat Angel, she knows how to reach me.
And when you say
So,
in town, where's in town for us?
oh, Evansville, Indiana, or the surrounding areas. We're kind of small, so there are a lot of areas around cities around us that people shop there. So the Gmail account is probably the best way to do it if you're not right around Evansville.
Sure. Well, Sandy, thank you so much for taking the time and participating on the Wise Old Soul podcast. We loved your stories. There's some exciting things coming up for you. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. I look forward to having the opportunity to talk to you again in the near future.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And I wish you well also. Thanks so much for what you do also.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching another session, The Wise Old Soul. My name is Lee Chandler. Have yourself a blessed day. It's been a pleasure.